But people will ask, what is happiness? Can you say what it is succinctly? And the best definition I've ever stumbled on was, it's what you're experiencing when you don't want things to be different than they are. Mm-hmm. Okay, why happiness? Because everything, I didn't get to see the show, but everything I read about it, I didn't see how it added up to happiness. And I remember when I heard you were touring with this, it was not at a time in America where that seemed like the right late, it was just post 9/11. It seemed like the oddest name for a show.
Yeah. I suppose that for me, it had more to do with, as an artist, happiness for me is sort of surprise. And I think you hinted about that in your book too, like what if a sentence ended for no reason with the word avocado? Right. I am so avocado. You're like, ooh. Is art surprise? Is that what, I mean, in certain ways, for me it is. I like art that turns something kind of upside down. I mean, it doesn't have to have the surprise element. It can also just have the beauty element or many other things that you could have. Right. But for me, the element of surprise is huge. I mean, I spent a lot of my childhood in my fort, in the woods, smoking oak leaf cigarettes, which are very easy to roll yourselves, and thinking of things that had never happened, scenarios that had never happened. I don't know why this was a kind of hobby that I had as a kid. Just weird little stories of a guy is walking down the road and a goose flies over his head, and at 1 second, from 1 second to the other, the goose has a heart attack, falls on the man's head, and things like this. I bet that never has happened in the history of the world, and for some reason, that's a satisfying thing for me to think of something that has not been in the world ever in any way. I mean, that's a very childish example of it, but there's something about the surprise of making something that hasn't been there. It's very, very, very godlike. I mean, it's artists I think are often attracted to that because you become a god. It wasn't there, and then you put that there. It's incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, to build reality.
Yeah.
That's what artists do, of course, but that's what everybody does. Every time we think about our own future, we're using imagination, probably not quite as well as you do, but we're using imagination to create scenarios. If I do this, if I marry Amanda or study the violin or move to New York, here's what will happen, here's how I'll feel. And it's really the thing that sets us apart from every other species on this planet is they're all here now. Be here now is really easy for a mouse. It's kind of hard for us because we have this talent of being drawn away into other parts of time, deep into our past as we remember. I mean, you're recounting your childhood. For human beings, that's such a natural thing to do. There's no other species that can do anything like look back and remember their childhood and smoking cigarettes and remember what they were thinking, or projecting ourselves far into the future. It's funny, when I talk to Buddhists, oftentimes they'll say, but we spend a lot of time, I'm not a Buddhist, by the way, and I only know what a normal literate person would know. So if there's secrets, don't tell me. But they'll often talk about the attempt to not be projecting into the future all the time, that this is kind of a problem. And as a scientist, I'm always thinking, oh my God, it's the greatest gift. It's what your frontal lobe is for. What do you mean you don't want to use it for that? So maybe you'd be a good person to kind of reconcile this for me.
I worked at McDonald's for a while, which is also, and did just a bunch of things that were really awkward for me to do. And I found out... a lot of things they were not what I expected, first of all, so that was part of it.
I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on the moment you walk into a McDonald's and go, hi, can I get an application? And they don't know. They just
go, sure. Really easy to work at McDonald's. Did you write easy to get the application
or something, and they thought, we have lots of those?
No, I just said I'd been doing various things in my life. They didn't ask a question at all about that. People don't really care that much what you do. And in fact, a lot of young artists ask me this, when they kind of are deciding, should I be an artist or not? Because how could I dare call myself an artist? And on about this, and what would people think? And I have to say, I have to tell you that not that many people care what you do. Actually, they care about as much about what you do as you care about what they do.
Oh,
not
no.
a lot. It's not going to rock your world if they call themselves an artist. You knock yourself out, have a great time,
Right.
But so I think it's a question of freedom that you prevent yourself from really being free by this little defense of, gee, what would people say?
Right, right.
If I actually decided to really be free,
So you worked at McDonald's, and
I did.
read an interview in which you said it was one of the happiest groups of employees you'd ever joined. How many groups of employees have you ever joined?
Well, a lot of employees. I mean,
Yep.
I have worked in a lot of groups. McDonald's was, well, we had Happy Meals for one thing,
Don't do it.
That's what we did there.
Reality is an experience that your brain creates from, it's a recipe, there's 2 ingredients. One is sensory information. I really do believe there's a floor here. I believe photons are hitting it. I believe if all life was absent, photons would still be hitting the floor. So there is an external reality. Information about it comes into our brains, but what we're experiencing right now, what we're calling reality, can't possibly just be a reflection of that. We know that actually your brain takes that information about things happening in the world and combines it with its theories of how the world ought to be and usually is, its memories of what used to happen, and in microsecond time, it creates this movie that you're seeing right now. I mean, the best example of this is, if you look, you believe you're seeing everything in great detail, but we know how the eye works. You're only seeing that much of the world in color and in great detail. What's happening is your eye is moving very fast around the room, and you're remembering each snapshot you take, and your brain is then sewing them together. Now, you don't have that experience. You just look and go, look, I'm seeing everything in great detail, but you're not. The brain's job is to fool you, and its job is to fool you so you can get on with the important work of surviving and reproducing. That is, all points in time are actually in the future or in the past. There is no present. The present is an infinitesimally small point on a line. And yet we all experience a present, which is to say that our brains do create this fiction called the present. And they do it by taking about 1.5 seconds of time from our past and about 3 seconds of time into the future and binding it together in something William James called the specious present, which is to say,
nice.
It's not
Sure.
really here.
Yeah.
So the present is actually... The present is what human beings bring to time. Mm-hmm. If you go to the beach, there's water and there's sand, and there's a line where they meet, but the line isn't a third thing. Look, water, sand, and a line. If I ask you about a dream you had, you say, yeah, I was driving in this car, and I go, what was the license plate? You'll never know. But if you were in a real car, you might go, oh, it was 47329. One of the ways we know, when this is work actually by a psychologist named Marcia Johnson on what she calls reality monitoring, one of the ways we know whether our memories came in through reality or were imagined is by looking for the amount of detail in them, looking at their coherence. If you remember driving in a car and suddenly there was a bear, likely it was a dream. Likely you were thinking of it rather than actually experiencing it. I don't find myself asking myself that question much. Mm-hmm. Did I imagine it? Mm-hmm. It might be because now that I'm thinking about it, I rely on my wife a lot. Did that happen? And she has a very good memory for these sorts of things. So I guess I've kind of outsourced reality for myself.
Yeah, I do have that problem.
You do or you don't?
I do.
You do?
Yeah. Did I imagine that or not?
Or if you have a very vivid of imagination, people have this problem.
Although the dream part of it, I'm pretty clear about that.
Dreams.
Yeah, that I know.
Because they're wild.
Yeah, and also, there are lots of unfinished details. Actually,
Right.
like you realize if you looked around the back of somebody you're dreaming about, that you haven't filled in the back yet.
Right.
It's kind of like very sketchy.